Hi, my name is Maria Figueredo. I'm a professor at York University and also someone that has been recovering from long COVID. And I've designed this and developed this workshop using something that I love is poetry as a way to heal, as a way to connect with some of the things that I struggled with while having long COVID. And a lot of that was the aspect of the mental health challenge of maintaining optimism and endurance through it all. And I've developed this workshop in order to help other people that might be in the same boat or that have gone through it or that are going through it now, and that in some way this could offer some solace. So the poetry workshop is called Keep On, Keeping On When the Road is Long. And it's about various themes. Some of the themes that I felt as I was going through it, which is how to express, how to accept. Acceptance is a big word for us, right? How do you accept that diagnosis? And then later, how do you accept that your body now has limitations with which you're dealing with and on energy levels daily? So there's a sense of FOMO, of fear of missing out on life, because all of a sudden, all the things that you wanted to do, all the things that you had planned, all the things that you knew about yourself to be, productive and achieving and or just enjoying are difficult now to place into this box of limits of points of pacing and finding not your so you're not overstretching yourself, and also exploring ways to get it out. So some of us journal, some of us paint, some of us can do things. Even finding the energy for that, I know, is tricky when you're in the main part of it. But poetry is good because it's a small art, and it's intense, and it transcends some aspects of the logic, and so we can allow the feelings to just come out and be there without having to narrate something or to put them into a state of application to anything. We just have an awareness of what we're hearing or what we're feeling. And also coping with the brain fog. Sometimes with poetry, we can just let images roll and not have to feel like we have to get the perfect word. Poetry can be freeing that way, and it's a sense of play. And so it's creative. It balances also the physical, because there's a sensual side to poetry with the sounds and with the words and the imagery and the colors, as well as the emotional side that we can connect to. So again, we don't have to focus or really base ourselves on the logic and cognitive function that sometimes in long COVID can be tricky. And then one of the things that I have found in my journey, and that maybe might be interesting for you to explore, is using imagery, poetic imagery, archetypal energy, mythological character imagery. And I have mythical and goddess imagery that's helped me to transcend symptoms, and I'll be presenting that in this workshop here as well as translating pain and discomfort into words that uplift instead of limit. One of the things that I found is that didn't want to keep talking about my symptoms in a way that sounded like I was complaining or getting down or sulking, but trying to figure out a way, how can we make beauty out of this pain and maybe help another person to understand us, maybe our family members who are finding it hard to now accept that we are different people than we used to be pre-COVID. And then I'll explain to you my journey, and then you can share with your journey about your journey if you like later. Also, shedding the embarrassment of like being slower to think or of having it. There was a stigma when you first can get or are diagnosed with long COVID, and then also the COVID, and then the long COVID. It's difficult because there's such subtle and nebulous symptoms that over time just drag you down. The fatigue, the brain fog, the aches, the pains, the difficulty swallowing, the swelling for me was one of the big ones, as well as the other issues with GI issues, etc. So all of that can be embarrassing to have to explain to people, and also to tell them, like, I can't do the things I wanted to do, even though I really want to do them anymore. And also the sense of voicelessness, like, who do I tell? I don't want to sound like I'm just complaining or bringing somebody down, but at the same time, you need to find a way to advocate for yourself sometimes, and also explain, not to maybe to others, even just to yourself, how I'm going to get through this and what I'm feeling, and that you give yourself that validation. And also finding the courage to rest and recover. It takes courage. I know that as a person that's a high achiever, and I'm a professor at a university. For me, the action and the intense rhythms are really something that I've enjoyed in my life. And when I had to slow it down, it just felt so boring. It just felt so hard to accept that I could just sit there and there was nothing else I could do physically but be with myself. And it brought up a lot of inner healing that I had to do around that, as well as that sense of accepting that resting is an action and that resting is the main component of healing for long COVID, as well as vitamin D, taking vitamin D, take self-care with a capital S, and recovering yourself so that you are your best caretaker and companion and ally. And also seeking humor, laughing, is a cliche, but it is the best medicine. Sometimes you just have to laugh at yourself and let that go. So we're going to have fun too in this workshop, as well as seeking humor to alleviate emotional physical pain. There are scientific, studies that show that humor can release tension in the body and all of that. So a lot of that is releasing tension, massage, physiotherapy, anything that we can help to get back in the body. And words are interesting because poetry can be a sense of sometimes just rhythm or sounds, and we don't need to make that logically fit anything, but it feels good sometimes to just get it out. And also to show other people, put it into crystallized forms of words like poetry to show what you're going through, maybe to invite support, invite understanding into that in a way that is a little bit lighter for people to hold, and then also celebrating the small wins. And I think that when I look back over the last 3 years since I've had COVID and then into long COVID, I look back at what I've written in my journals, and I really am, happy that I documented it, and I have so many pages of my journey to show, oh my God, I've really come a long way, and I can be proud of myself for just accepting that and maybe seeing what can I learn and glean as joy and understanding of the present moment from this. So as you see on the screen here, I'm a writer. I write a lot. I've always written poetry, especially is my art form, and I'm an academic. I teach at a university. I teach courses in literature, in Spanish language, in culture, in civilization and history, especially in the Latin American and Hispanic Spanish world. I'm a researcher in literature. I talk about the relationship of literature and music many times. I love those interconnections. And I love talking about the feminine in literature, which is gender neutral. It's an aspect that is, let's say, the logos let's say, is the masculine principle, which is organization, logic, more of the scientific approach, not quantum, but more of the linear scientific approach. And then the feminine is more of the circular or the spiral or the cyclical or the creative, nonverbal, perhaps, expression of language, because language has sound, rhythm, the underlying impulses. Also, there's a rhythm to the body, there's a rhythm to nature, there's a frequency underlying all music and sound. So there's that feminine principle of the creative impulse and the creation in general to birth something, which is key there too, which I love to explore in literature and language. And also I am a community events organizer. I worked a lot with the Hispanic community in Canada, especially in Ontario and the GTA, as well as dealing with the relationship of poetry with other things in society, such as sports, with the Olympics, the Pan Am Games, although I was at the London Olympics, Poetry Parnassus there, so I did some research in that regard as well. And it's that idea that poetry can be out in the world and not just in a room with us reading, which is beautiful and lovely, and in a library as well, but in poetic circles, but also it can accompany us in other places. And we'll talk about that in other researchers and other writers who have focused on how poetry can heal in the health environments as well. So today I wanted to welcome you all. You can share your experiences of long COVID. We're going to go through some readings of some healing poetry that I have found for you that I hope you like from previous writers. And then a short presentation by medical representative. I've got their bios here, and we'll have them send in a quick greeting to you. And here's just a few. This is some of the medical representatives that I've worked with: Laura McLaughlin and Rebecca Hamel. And then I'm going to present a poem that I wrote during my long COVID journey, and then we'll take you through a process for you to write your own. And so I really am grateful to my medical team, my psychologist and my occupational therapist and my two physiotherapists. Laura McLaughlin focused more on the physical side for me. One of the things that was interesting is that I found her because I actually fell, probably from my body fatigue, fell and broke my toe, and went to her for that. And it ended up being that she is one of the foremost experts in research on the effects of breathing. And so, again, as you know, with long COVID, breathing is heavily affected, and the lungs, the power. And that, after having COVID, and then later I had two vaccines, which caused me to plunge more deeply into the symptoms, prolonged and protracted length of time. It was that sense of raising awareness of where my breathing had gone wrong. And they did an analysis with a capnographer in her office of my breathing. And they told me, well, I've got some good news and bad news. She said, you got the bad news is, or the good news is that, yes, your breathing has really been in a detriment to your health. And also the good news is that we can help you recover. We've got some strategies for that. And that's where Rebecca Hamel. So I did get physical therapy for the pain and the tension in my body and my neck and body from Laura McLaughlin. And she oversaw the breathing work that I've been doing with Rebecca Hamel, and I still continue to do with the capnographer. And they measure your CO2 levels and how much breathing you're actually getting. And I was able to retrain my body. I wasn't even able to get breathing lower down from the diaphragm down because of the pain I felt. And it was interesting. We discovered that I was holding my breath because the deeper I breathed, the more pain I felt in my body. So it was a coping mechanism for me as a pain relief. And slowly and surely, as I've been recovering and releasing and feeling less pain, I've been able to breathe more deeply. And the breathing has helped as well, because when you don't have enough CO2 to your blood cells, your blood and your cells, it also can cause pain. So I learned from her to breathe deeply into my hips, that the most important part of breathing is actually the exhale, and to let all of the air out and to exhale fully before you can really start feeling that oxygen reaching all levels of your body. So I really was grateful to them, as well as I learned from Dr. Berg, who's a naturopath on line, and he recommended taking high doses of vitamin D, which has really helped me. And perhaps you would like to try. There are no side effects to that if you take under 100,000 IUs a week for less than 6 months. So he was recommending taking 70,000 IUs, which is a lot more than normally we take, right? I was taking, I think, 500 a day or something like that, or 1,000, if that. And then some of us in countries that are Nordic, we don't get as much sun. So this was huge. And I really noticed a spike in my energy after I started taking this. And the key, he said, was 70,000 IUs a week, but not at the same time, or not 10,000 a day equally. It's better to take it on 2 separate days with 2 different doses. So I would take 50,000 on Tuesday, and then maybe 20,000 on Saturday, or vice versa. So you let some of that go through, and you let your body rest. And then that supposedly helps with the absorption, as well as with the vitamin C's and the K2 and other vitamins that help, especially the B complex vitamins help that absorption, and all of them work together in tandem, as well as rest. And poetry sometimes was a way for me to express all of that. So some of the things that I read when I was recovering, and sometimes, as you know, reading can be even tiring. On our pacing chart, that can take up 3 to 4 points out of 5 or 6. And one of the things is I like to keep it in short, like 1 or 2 pages a day would be sometimes all that I could do, if that. And Julia Cameron has this book called The Sound of Paper, and she's an expert in creative writing and creative process. And I loved her books, The Artist's Way from 1992, and her book, The Vein of Gold, The Journey to Your Creative Heart from 1996, which I recently found when I was in Sedona for a goddess retreat in 2022. And The book that also I would like to read is Right for Life, which I have not read. It was published in 2023 by Julia Cameron. But the one I found, and I found it at a thrift store, was The Sound of Paper, 1995. And I was thrilled when I found that book. And it's a book about writing pages and writing every morning 3 pages, which I tried to do, which ended up helping me, even though sometimes it was a struggle and sometimes it was the only thing I could write. But I would try to keep that as a rhythm and process in my life. And she has some wonderful tips about how you can and tools about how to just organize that and keep it as a discipline, like having lunch, brushing your teeth, writing the 3 pages. And sometimes that was a tool for healing and also inspiration, because it's a beautifully written book, her book. And just that beauty, even just the title, Sound of Paper, the beauty of little things like the touch of a feather or hugging a tree, which really helps. As you know, scientific proof shows that if we touch nature, if we ground our feet, our bare feet or our hands on the grass or on trees, it actually does reduce cortisol levels and harmonizes the body's biorhythms. So I think touching a book, not just reading it digitally, has that sometimes sense also of comfort and touch, especially if you don't have people around you. And then also just the imagery and the way she structures the book between New Jersey or yes, I think it's New Jersey and New York and New Mexico, where she also has a home, and just the way she describes day-to-day scenes from her window, the trees, the sun, the weather, etc., and of how that touches her memory, her experiences, and her writing is a beautiful thing. And I think we have to get back down to that grassroots feeling of what does it feel like to live in my body, and to get that relationship back with my inner self. And then another book I found was The Poetry Remedy by William Sieghart, Prescriptions for the Heart, Mind, and Soul. And this is a beautiful book because it was on something of a research theme also, or line of research that I was doing about emotional and mental well-being through poetry. And of course, I've always researched that, especially in relationship to women and trauma, and how women writers have found a way or a solution to heal trauma through writing. And one of the things that he says here in the introduction I find beautiful, and I share with his view. You don't need to be a poet to find solace in poetry. I was 8 years old when I was first sent to boarding school, and I was desperately unhappy at that time when friends were in short supply. I found that poetry became my friend. Reading it aloud was the only thing I was good at. I even won a prize or two doing it. That, I think, began my whole relationship with poetry. For me too, I was a very shy child. And so for me, reading was a beautiful, wonderful relationship that I had with characters and imagery and different worlds. Since then, these careful crystallizations of feelings, thought, and experience have been a loyal and generous companion to me, even in the most difficult times. Again, in my loneliest hours and in my most tumultuous, I have discovered the greatest solace in finding, reading, and sometimes memorizing the perfect poem in the moment, for the moment. As a young adult, I was about to cross a road in London when the lights changed. A man standing next to me stepped out into the path of a car and was immediately run down. The suddenness of it all was incredible. The next thing I knew, he was lying on the road unconscious. Somebody from the crowd was giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and had asked for my help pumping the poor man's heart back to life. He was lucky. By some incredible fluke, an ambulance was there in a matter of minutes. A man's heart started beating again. The police took my statement and off he sped, leaving me standing uselessly on the same street corner with the traffic flowing by. Life went on as it had before. The only evidence of this extraordinary drama was my hands, still covered with blood. As I slowly got my breath back, I remember a poem I'd learned of Philip Larkin's. It's called Ambulances. And it's about the drama and anguish we go through when situations like this arise. How seeing an ambulance brings the dread we feel about the future into greater focus and dulls to distance all we are. Quote unquote. Between those apt words and the strong drink I immediately sought out, I was helped to process what had been a bizarre, unexpected, and very destabilizing 2 hours. That particular poem didn't make it into this book in the end, but what it did in that moment points to something much more universal. Like that isolated 8-year-old or that quaking young man, a great many of us turn to poetry in times of need. Above all, when we're grieving, when we're brokenhearted and when we find ourselves struggling to understand the things we're feeling. We long for the connection that poetry can provide. To find the right poem at that crucial moment, one capable of expressing our situation with considerably more elegance than we can ourselves, is to discover a powerful sense of complicity and that precious realization, I'm not the only one who feels like this. And I'm going to cry because that's exactly how I felt going through COVID. And when I ended up finally being able to get into the post-acute COVID program in Ontario, in London, Ontario, I was some of that, most of that was in addition to the medical advice that was given through the virtual series that I was able to be a part of, was just hearing other people that were going through the same thing as I was. And not that I wish anybody to go through what I did, but I just didn't feel so alone. In the words of Alan Bennett, the best moments in reading are when you come across something, a thought, a feeling, a way of looking at things, which you had thought special and particular to you. Now, here it is, set down by someone else, a person you have never met, someone who's even long dead. And it is as if a hand has come out and taken yours. And here's my hand to you, sorry, it's for you. Problem is shared. More than that, very often it is transformed. The poet has made what you're going through seem more intriguing, more timeless, and more valid in some way. And that can be a great comfort. The distance afforded by seeing one's own emotions formalized and made beautiful combines with the visceral connection one feels with this poet, this stranger, who understands, and what results is a sort of peace. This idea that there can be a therapeutic power to a poem is the heart of the poetry remedy. But that therapeutic power only exists if you can find the right poem for the right state of mind. This book aims to help by gathering poems that I know from experience will help people through most conceivable difficulties in day-to-day lives. And he goes through and he talks about this project called the Poetry Pharmacy that they developed. And he would sit in a tent in Cornwall, England, and people would come by and he would actually choose a poem from a book as a prescription to people and what they needed. And let's say heartache, or they've got different things here, anxiety, is the condition, compulsive behavior, depression, existential crisis, glumness, feelings of unreality, dissatisfaction with life, loss of creativity, etc., emotional repression, displacement, all these things. So he comes up with different poems for different aspects of life. And we're going to be reading a poem from his book a little bit later. But first, I wanted to start with a poem by Rupi Kaur. As you can see here, I've got her book, The Sun and Her Flowers there. I, for one, love flowers. As you can see, I'm wearing them. I love nature. It has healed me, and flowers have a wonderful frequency that I always tried to have in my home to lift my spirits. And here's a poem. She has several books, but this book is The Sun and Her Flowers from 2017 that you can find on Amazon. This is from the Amazon image. And Healing Through Words is a workbook or a tool book that you can use. There are prompts that you can write with if you prefer to have prompts instead of writing on your own. And then also Homebody, which is her book from 2020, which talks about being at home in your body and being grateful for the body and really cherishing and celebrating the body. And The Sun and Her Flowers has this poem that's one of the most beautiful things that I wanted to bring for you today. This is the recipe of life, said my mother, as she held me in her hands, in her arms, as I wept. Think of those flowers you plant in the garden each year. They will teach you that people too must wilt, fall, root, rise in order to bloom. And I thought that beautifully captured what one feels when one has long COVID, because it's something that's so drawn out. Did you know that the 30 to 40 people that have acute sense of COVID later develop long COVID symptoms? And many people probably don't even know. But it just affects all of your life, doesn't it? You feel like you can't do anything. There's a sense of angst of not being able to lift yourself up out of the bed or out of the chair as you normally did. And everything, even just brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, becomes a huge chore. And it just feels like you just want to give up sometimes, right? And I think it's one of the things that I was helped with by my medical team is just to accept the cycles of life are not up, up, up. It can sometimes go down. And in that down, we can celebrate and remember when we had all that energy. And I have energy back, thank God. And I encourage you to keep going if you still are in the throes of long COVID, because it will get better. It does get better, but give yourself that rest. And remember that sometimes you have to root down into yourself. If you can't be active, you root down in and let your heart be active, and just let your heart talk to you, and just be with yourself. And that is enough. And that is also an action. And then you will bloom again. There's also a poem by Mary Oliver. It's all over TikTok. I think there were some famous actors that read it. Mary Oliver is an American poet who won the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize, and also wrote a lot about nature and solitary walks in the wild, and was born in Ohio in 1935, and passed away in Florida, one of the places I love as well, in 2019. And her poem that's very well known is Wild Geese. This is a picture of her here holding a beautiful conch shell. And this poem is so beautiful too. Let's do it together. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Mary Oliver. And I'd like to, read to you a little bit more of some of the notes I'd taken when I was preparing this workshop. And, I was wondering, like, what would people think of a workshop like this? And how do you put into words, what we've experienced? And how can we do that in a way that's not limiting and helps us, instead of maybe relives or re-traumatizes us or other people? And how can we do this in a way that's beautiful? And I think these poems that I'm reading to you are healing, right? They accept that there are harsh parts of the world where we feel despair, we feel like giving up, we feel lonely, we feel sadness, we feel like the world is harsh. But at the same time, there's the beautiful side to it that keeps us going and nourishes us. And so this poetry is not really about becoming a great writer, although we recognize that some people have a gift like Mary Oliver, and also this, all the others I've mentioned to you, like Rupi Kaur, and some of the other ones we're going to mention, Kaur. But we're going to think about it here as becoming aware of words, and it's becoming aware of the words we use in daily speech. It's becoming aware of how we put into words what we're wanting to say to people when we're asking for help, or if poetry can somehow capture a sublime side to life and not just the pragmatic side. And it's not, like I said, really about becoming a poet or a great writer or publishing your poetry manuscript, even though I'm thinking of publishing one. And if you'd like to send me your poems about long COVID, please do. And I'd like to include it in my manuscript. But, we can't compare ourselves to Shakespeare or Plato or Leonard Cohen or Margaret Atwood or any of the big writers that we may know or that have heard of or not. It's about playing with words. And it's about taking the words as light, like sunlight in our hands, and becoming aware of them. And it's not really about using the genre of literature as a genre, but as a tool, so that poetry, there are long poems, of course, epic poems, narrative poems, etc., but it can also be very brief, and there are micro stories and there are micro poems and haikus and things like that, where, especially for those of us with long COVID, and those of us that struggle with words or energy, you want something that you can produce or create that can be small, but at the same time intense and beautiful and concise and subtle as a one verse or one line. And there are some micro poems that are very famous, and there are comparisons between lyric verse and songwriting. And in some cases, it's not really about connecting words just to an emotion or a state of being or feeling. There's also imagery, constellations of imageries, colors, feelings, phonemes or sounds that just somehow mean something to us, even though we don't logically know what at the moment. Anything that comes to mind that connects to our experience. And that's what really we're exploring, that cosmos within you. It's your world. And as you are exploring it, then you bring it out and someone else can connect. Ooh, I see. I also find relevance to them in my world. Or, ooh, that's something completely unique and different to compared to my world. And that's an interplay. That's a dynamic that we can also engage with. And you realize also when you're writing that you're the observer of your impressions about your life. So you're not the victim anymore. You're not at the whim of these things or the conditions such as long COVID. And you can step outside it and look at it and observe it and then not deny what you're feeling. And at the same time, you just observe it and create something from it. So, for example, if I were to have created something from COVID, it would have been, it's the word waiting. And we're going to get to a poem that I wrote called Waiting in just a moment. But I have one more here, a couple of more actually for you. This one is called Miracles by Richard Jones. And it's about the present moment, which I really gleaned a true appreciation and true love for again when I had COVID. And I just started loving myself. This is all I can do. And that's good. And that's enough. And you don't have to repent about it. You're good. And this one, it goes like this. I need to witness miracles today. A river turned to blood. Water become wine. A burning coal touching the prophet's lips. Black ravens swooping down to bring a starving man bread and meat. A poor fisherman raising the dead. I heard theologians say this is not the age of miracles, but still I'm easy to impress. But still, I don't need to climb out of the boat and walk on water. I'd just like to put my head on the pillow while the storm still rages and rest. This poem is found in Richard Jones's book, The Correct Spelling and Exact Meaning, which you can find in the link. If you like, I can share it with you. But when I got to that final line, I'm like, oh, yeah, he captured what that was like with long COVID. To rest is you have to grapple with getting yourself there and just giving yourself that. While the storm going on around you, things have to be done. People wondering what you're doing. Maybe you have kids, maybe you have to just keep working. And you finally just take the courage and the storm is still raging, but you rest. And you know you need that rest in order to keep on keeping on. Another poem that I brought to you is called Poem. And this comes from this ebook that was written by several writers and poets who compiled poetry from around the world about healing, poems of healing. And it's by the United Nations System Workplace Mental Health and Wellbeing. And it was published in 2021, right around the time that people were experiencing COVID and long COVID. And so there are some poems in here about COVID itself, not long COVID in particular, but beautiful poems. And I've chosen this one from page 79, which really spoke to me, and I hope it speaks to you. It's a poem. Speak, they inquired, but the voices within were overwhelming, in deafening silence, limiting beliefs, automatic negative thoughts, generalizations, deletions, creating an alternative reality. How are you, really? They asked, paused, leaned in, expectant, partly posed to flight. The silence rose sharply, then settled, doubt between us, as we received and sipped our drinks, focused on shared experience, similarity, not doubt. The years have flown, our mindsets too, but not the essence of who we are. Me and my mental health status, them in theirs. What I love about this poem and what I love about poetry is the freedom, right? Poetry then can throw out grammatical rules, maybe not spelling, because sometimes you need to play with that. Neologisms or invention of words can be cool, but sometimes spelling can be difficult for people to actually understand you. But you can play with capitalizations, as this poem does here. The poet's name, and I hope to pronounce it okay, Nyambichi Macharia. She plays with capital letters here, which I find very significant and meaningful, and provide us to think of questioning, why is that there? And what is that? What effect is that having as I'm reading this poem? What does it mean? And I play that with that as well too. So the distance between words, or the fact of missing different commas or periods there, or semicolons within her poem, and just keep the sentence going. Interesting there with the capitalization, showing where a new thought begins, or when a really hefty concept is introduced. And I do that a lot in my poetry as well. And all that's so meaningful, where she says, but the voices were in the deafening silence, limiting with a capital L, sort of this strong sense of the impact of the limiting beliefs that we sometimes have, that we have to grapple with to let go of. Automatic negative thoughts. You think, oh God, I'm always going to be like this. It's always going to be negative, and I'm losing so much, and I'm losing so much time, and I'm losing so much opportunities, or I'm losing, all the things that I used to have in my youth, my energy, my vitality, my ability to think quickly, etc. And this idea of reality, which is a capital L, not just the small l, the idea then of the great concept of our life, and overarch of our perception of our life, as well as what we're living. And I love that. How are you really? For me, that was a moment of pause in the poem, as you saw when I read it, and this moment of impact. It's not just a trite question of how are you today? Oh, I'm okay. It's really a sense of, we really want to know, what's the reality of what you're experiencing. And they asked, and then paused with a capital again, with a heftiness to it, a length to it, leaned in expectantly, partly posed to flight. So they kind of want to know. Sometimes people do want to know how you are. This is my interpretation. You might have another. Sometimes people are kind of afraid, if they open that floodgates, hold those floodgates of them, things. Oh God, I'm dealing with so much myself. I really don't have the energy to be a shoulder to cry on at that moment for someone else, or I really can't feel the pain because it'll just hurt too much to feel your pain as well as mine. All these things go through our head as humans, right? The silence rose sharply. And again, that pause and that momentary feeling of that experience of the silence in the communication with somebody, and then settled between us. And between us is sort of this gap between the two people, showing that distance. And again, with poetry, we were seeking connection, as we saw in the introduction to the Poetry Remedy. And so this idea of how with conversation can we experience connection, but also distance. As we received and sipped our drinks, so basically now there's a distraction from the conversation, focused on shared experience. Again, the drinks are connecting us. Similarity, not doubt. So there's that sense again of what we can connect with, that joins us to other people, or connects to other people, similarity, but then what is unique to us and sometimes people can't relate to. The years have flown, our mindsets too, but the essence of who we are, I love that capital, again, like reality, the true essence of who we are, perhaps not just our little who goes through the world, the social maskings, or just to get by. Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Fine, good. Me and my mental health status. And the mental health awareness has become very important, hasn't it, in the world recently. And I really applaud Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, for really raising awareness there, as well as other great people. And them in theirs. That's, I think, the most interesting and intriguing line in that poem. Them in theirs. So how were they in their mental status, as well as me, so that we're connecting on that level of that we are and we're not aware of each other, and maybe we can't be, right? There are limits to that. This is my poem called Waiting. And you'll see, for me, I kept thinking of what is a word that I associate with long COVID. And for me, it was like, oh, the struggle. Sometimes I would cry of how long is this going to take for me to feel better again, to feel normal again, to be able to think clearly and not struggle to find a word, or just not struggle to go to the door and open the door, or just go get the mail, etc. So for me, there's that sense of the frustration that came with the word waiting, as well as this idea of difficulty to breathe, waiting for the body to catch up. So it was always, when I had COVID, it was always very hard to breathe. I couldn't do anything except lying in bed and crying and feeling in pain. I felt the worst I'd ever felt. I would never wish this on anybody. It was horrific. Or sleeping, which was the only relief. But also the difficulty breathing, help didn't felt helpless, felt, also obstructed sleep sometimes. And it just felt like that when you're coughing, you're feeling unwell, and you're just waiting for the body to slowly hear this word, waiting, waiting, waiting. You have to give it up to not your ego or not your willpower or not your faith. You just have to give it up to the wait. And the waiting for me was a very hard thing. As you know, it's been a long haul. And I tried to push myself through, which set me back. And so I really learned to listen to, respect my body's need for me to wait, to hold my horses on the healing. So it was almost like the sense of pressure I felt, and I put myself on, on the one hand, and also of the fear or the anger of feeling out of control of what my mind and my willpower I could achieve over my body. And it's also the matter of listening to my body. So waiting can also be the sense of anticipation, for listening to signals from my body, because I always knew that when I pushed myself, I would start to cough and I would get breathless and feel like I couldn't get enough oxygen. And all of that was my body telling me that it needed me to rest. It needed me to breathe deeply. It needed me to know what to listen for in terms of what was going on in my body, and also to have the sense of patience. Isn't that interesting? When you're a patient of a hospital, it's asking you to be patient. So, always waiting for that moment of acceptance to be patient. It's also a sense of grayness, right? The color that comes to mind with waiting is gray, this in between, this not really knowing what's going to flourish from this. And when I recovered from COVID after that month and a half, that was really quite severe, and not as severe as my partner, who had actually gone to emergency and couldn't breathe at all, couldn't sleep for 4 days at all, 3, 4 days at all. It was pretty horrible. I remember feeling like I was suffocating from not being able to breathe. So another word associated was with suffocating, and the miracle of breath and the beauty of breath. And I'm so grateful to be able to breathe, and that sense that there's a healthy way to breathe, that we talked about earlier, and that breath can modulate our nervous system, the vagus nerve. My physiotherapist, the physical side, really worked on modulating my vagus nerve and calming my vagus nerve down. And so breath has its own constellation, right, of meanings. And I think the color of breath for me was blue and red. Red is like when I get into the anger zone, but it's also energy. And blue was calm and serene. White and gold would be when it's in a good space. When I see the fluidity of it, when I see there's a flow, but also a rhythm, it's also very musical, right? Our breath is very musical, very rhythmic. So I really appreciate my breath now. It's like my gems that I wear around my throat. I love it. My throat chakra has slowly been healing too, because I'm a singer, and it's also been it affected my singing and my vocal cords, and slowly been able to getting that back has recovered my joy. But there was a lot of grief over the loss of that for many years that gave me so much joy. Also, I had to take vaccines soon after having recovered from COVID in August of 2021, in September. And in order to return to work, I had to really have those quickly. And I didn't really feel right about it, but I did so. And in December of 2021 and January 2022, after only having had COVID after only 8 weeks, I took those vaccines, even though I had read research online in England and other places. I think it was Belgium, the Netherlands, that you should really wait 8 months to a year to take your vaccines after having had acute COVID, because your body's still working out the immune response. And so anyway, after 8 weeks, I did have them. And I think that's what set me down the long path, the slippery slope of long COVID. It's from my feeling of what I went through. It could be different for other people. But unfortunately, I had to do that in order to get back to work, and I had to get a vaccine sooner than I wanted. And then all of that ended up making me miss more work later, because I couldn't get past the symptoms that were after that quite debilitating. Couldn't think straight, couldn't sit at the computer at all, headaches, aches, pains. I couldn't get up out of bed. It was like having, fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome all wrapped into a flu all the time. And it was horrible. And the relationships we lose because of that, and the opportunities of work that we lose. And I had to cancel, couldn't go through a concert that I wanted to do. I couldn't finish some books that I was writing. I couldn't, go to some conferences that I wanted to go to. I couldn't go visit family that I wanted to visit. So psychologically, emotionally, sexually, socially, mentally, all of that you have to be patient with to become yourself again. And you're losing, you feel like you're losing part of yourself, but you're waiting for your body to catch up with all that you want to be and all that you want to do, and not being able to just immediately jump to the gratification for everything. So it's really come back to that sense of nature and nature seasons, and perhaps like being in Antarctica, maybe like it's a long winter, long COVID, right? Longer than we normally get in the cycle. And we want it to be over until we're able to get, that flight back to summer, to Tahiti, let's say to some tropical paradise or some countryside where things are easy and breathing is easy and movement is easy again and dancing is easy and walking and getting dressed are easy again. So I think back to poetry, I think we can pinpoint these little centers of these little constellations and explore them to make them into what, we can just play with and toss them back and forth with. And it helps, right, to talk about it and to put it into these metaphors, because then it gets them out of our subconscious, out of our tension, out of our body's coping mechanisms to protect us, and make them conscious, so that through poetry that's very succinct. As I mentioned, there's longer writing poetry that you can do, but it's concise for those of us with long COVID that felt like that's all we could do is write one verse a day, something like that. That you can sort of set it up like a concise art form, like a little song or a little melody, one more step, that we can just release it into these little pills of words and take it just with a little bit of soothing medicine. So the last point I want to make about this is getting into the flow. It's a sort of meditation with words, opened up as a channel, so that you let whatever's in you flow through without you filtering it with your mind or criticizing or telling yourself you shouldn't feel that way, etc. And you just let it flow as if you're just the observer of these things coming through you. And that way you're just channeling what God or source or intelligence or your higher power, whatever you connect with, is trying to get you to bring awareness to in that moment. And sometimes we just let that channel, that excuse me, and then we're just not that one little physical tiny being in the middle of a huge universe, but that we can sometimes feel overwhelmed or this oppressive sense of being a victim to something. At the same time, we're opening our ear to channeling from a higher source, or to the cheer or a good vibe or the energy flow that our bodies can draw strength from. Something, I'm sure you felt that through a music or a song or a movie even, or a scene, or the touch of a loved one, or this looking at your babies or your grandchildren or your niece or your pet, to overcome feelings of isolation and feelings of powerlessness and feelings of loneliness. And it's just reaching out to this higher source that I know I'm never alone, and that I'm surrounded by help, and I'm always inspired by this loving support. And I open to my channeling to even just report, what I'm feeling. I see a tree, I like the tree, I like the leaves, that kind of little thing, just like a little pill of activity, of energy, to focus our attention, to be in the flow, to receive the energy from our subconscious, maybe, or from our inner being, maybe from our higher source, our inner child, maybe from a past loved one that maybe isn't even here anymore physically, maybe from something else, our soul, or whatever you want to envision. But it's giving you that information that later can release the energy that's in your neural pathways as a repeating thought form, and replace it with something better. And as we hear and listen to each other's words, maybe we not only feel supported and validated, but we also see our connections to a greater universe and to others, and we don't feel as isolated, or we feel less crazy, maybe, that we're imagining things, or we internalize the harsh, strict, thing, get to it, do this, stop whining and complaining. No, but sometimes your body really is signaling for you to accept that and release that situation, to honor it in a little way. And this poem can be like a little honoring of that, a little celebration on paper of who you are in that moment, a little snapshot. And then you release it like a paper boat into the sea of consciousness, onto the sea of consciousness. And then it's not so much a pressure or an overwhelming sense upon you anymore. For example, I go back to my initial keyword that came to mind when I associate my experience with long haul COVID, and it could be waiting. And notice that waiting is a verb, so it's an action. So even though it sounds like it's stillness and nothingness, it actually isn't action. It takes effort to wait, because it's willpower to accept that you're having to be in this intermediary space of in betweenness. And it's a gerund. The gerund means any word that ends in an ing. So it's a process, waiting. So not wait. It's not a command. Or I wait, which is the present tense. I wait right now for something. Waiting for me, this communicates that process of a cycle of over and over and over, and it's prolonged. And it's not just I wait for 5 minutes, it's waiting. And also, to me, there's a play, and I just thought of it, of weight. There's a weight to waiting. Wait, weight, right? It's a pressure to wait. It's mature to wait. Waiting is a form of self-discipline. It's a form of acceptance. It's a form of resolution. It's a form also of focus, to allow the body to wait upon healing. And if we take that word and try to think of as many words as we can think of that rhyme with it, because let's play with poetry, let's play with rhyme like Taylor Swift does, another great poet. I started coming up with these: frustrating, gating. And then these words came to me as I channeled. So when I write poetry, they come to me. Here I've taken up some poetic form of neologism, as I mentioned, gating, like tailgating, but I cut it down to gating, because for me, it ties on this idea of when you're in traffic flow and you're waiting and you don't want to be stuck in traffic congestion, you're in a bottleneck, but people are tailgating, you feel the pressure from all sides. That to me was like what COVID felt like. I felt like life was pressuring me to do things, or my mind wanted to do things, but it's like I was stuck, and I was like, oh, I wanted to go, but I couldn't go. I wanted to go, but couldn't go, and I was stuck, and I couldn't breathe properly, and all that idea of the exhaust too. So the idea of wanting to breathe clear, fresh air. And gating is a made up word, right? It's also the sense of threshold, where you're going through a doorway, through a gateway of before and after, of who I was to who I'm going to be and who I am right now in the waiting. So there's a sense of creation of a new sense of self and appreciation for myself as a waiter. In this case, it's not a good time in many cases when you're getting over an illness. And then there's also a word that is not usually used to get gating, and this idea of halting and stuttered action. That the gate blocks you, right? The gate can be a threshold that you cross through, but it also can be a limit. And then this idea of tailgating, as I mentioned, like my body is a car, it's a vehicle, it takes me places, and now it's telling me, oh no, it's going to stay and you're not going anywhere. And this idea that my mind and my heart, come on, move faster, faster. Again, my willpower fighting the waiting, and my heart wanting to do things, and my body saying, no, rest, stop, or I'll make you feel worse. So it's like this idea of acceptance and resignation to the waiting. So you got waiting, gating, tailgating, seating. I also got that idea of being, without energy. And notice here, I've left some without commas on purpose to get this idea of how the words are spinning in my head and how I'm trying to spin my wheels, but it's not going anywhere. And I'm not letting it rest. I'm still at that moment of trying. And then I've got translating my, and then I've shifted to the next line, and that's on an intended break of a line, body, and I've highlighted body and signals into understanding, which is another gerund ing word, what it needs and wants from me. And see, the next line drops into the acceptance. Updating is another verb that came to me, a new sense of being through this waiting period. Coming forth, again, another gerund in the verb coming. So there's a sense of movement, but it's not from pushing or from moving faster. Like I've got come on, which is a verb of imperative action. It's an imperative verb, which means go, do something. But coming is now the gerund, which is sitting back into letting the energy come through me and not pushing to it. That's slowing down, not as active, as productive as before. And I let that word hang because it's important to emphasize at the end of a line. When a word hangs like that, it's emphasized. There's like a line underneath it. Just like faster. Now the center of my poem is before. And then waiting now returns. It has a capital W because the waiting is the crux of the matter. And it is the essence of everything of my healing, waiting. And here I've got some colors associated with blue, sometimes red because of the anger, because of the internal situation that I'm feeling, sensing anger at not being able to do things I want to do as quickly as I want to do them. Also, the sense of unfairness of why me and not other people? Why am I going through this? I was healthy. What was my problem, etc. And then maybe the golden, and I've got here then the golden hour, jostling into being patient with myself. And the golden hour for me is the sense of dusk and dawn, where it's beautiful and just appreciating that slow rise of the sun and the slow setting of the sun, and being more in sync with the day's cycles and not feeling like I'm missing out really on everything that I'm feeling like I'm a victim to having lost. And so this idea of moving forward with healing and having to learn a new pace of healing, to be patient with myself, to love myself, self-nurture myself, self-care. And I associate those with the colors red and blue and something like the aurora borealis in the background. And then we're getting to that point here. And then the golden hour, jostling into being patient with myself. And I love that oxymoron, which is a contradiction in terms, because being patient with yourself sounds like it would be passive and relaxed and just like letting into this, sliding into it. For me, it's jostling into it. It's like, I've got to fight my way into patience, and it really is a struggle. And then, like the aurora borealis, this beautiful constellation of colors, or tailgating of clouds. And here I've actually taken the gating and made it tailgating, again, connecting with the idea of traffic, now projected onto the sky, that the clouds are kind of like the traffic congestion, obscuring the sun, which is another metaphor for me of, feeling good. The clouds are like the illness or the negative thoughts, crossing desert skies, which are known to be, expansive and open to the sun and bright and clear air, high towards the waiting of waiting. And here for me, it's like the yes of yes, right? It's like the intensity of waiting, but it's also the essence of waiting. So waiting upon the waiting, being patient enough to be patient, and to learn that waiting is an art, and to come from that, and to create a little gem of experience. And the waiting of the waiting is that I've got this little poem now that honors my way of seeing that experience, but it also makes it beautiful, so that I'm transmuting negative feelings into this alchemical element, elementary agent of negative experience, turning into something that makes me feel a little better and makes me feel like, oh, that's beautiful. It really captures something, that little pill form that really captures something, a little gem of experience under the pressure of that experience. And that becomes my little diamond that I'm offering here to you in this workshop. There's also an element of play here that, as you see, as I'm playing with this, sometimes it's part of it's channeling, part of it's playing with words and hearing, that creative activity and the process of my mind and how it comes across on the page, all the ways that it's laid out on the page, on visually. And so I'd like now for you to choose a word that comes to mind. We're going to do a claiming your art affirmation exercise now. And before we begin, I'd like to have a little breathing exercise for us to focus in on. And I probably need to do this right now for me, as I've been talking a lot, and I'm so proud of myself being able to talk so long after 3 years. So just to breathe in deeply, imagine your breath going right down to your hips. 1, 2, 3, in and hold. Now exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, hold. Down, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold. One more time. 1, 2, 3, hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, out. Exhale all the way out, down to your hips, and hold. Square breathing, which helps meditating. In meditation, this is used, which is, of course, scientifically proven to increase health and well-being, mental also, uh, mental awareness. But also I've learned from my physiotherapist that breathing in, breathing, exhaling is actually the most important action. Making sure you exhale. When you think you've exhaled to the end, make sure you exhale more. There's always more. That's where the oxygen magic happens, and holding it. Now, I want you to visualize. If you want, you can close your eyes. Visualize a word that comes to mind when you think of COVID. Okay, write down that word. Now, make a little sun. And out of that word, you're going to draw some lines like we did in school with suns or little triangles. Just make lines coming out of that word like I did with waiting. Now, in the first line, you're going to take and write at the end of that line a color or a hue that you associate with your experience of long COVID. Any color or hue or tone. Next, at the end of another line, write an adjective that you associate with long COVID. On a third line, write a phrase or a sentence that comes to mind. Like, keep on keeping on. When will this end? Why me? Another line, add an image. Sun, or a flower, pansy, prickly pine, or cactus. Anything. Now take 2 lines and write 2 verbs. You can write the verbs in any form you want. To swim, to write, to dream, to be, anything you want. 2 verbs. Training, breathing, resting, overcoming, something like that. Or I overcome, I withstand, I do not accept, anything like that. Pause if you need to at any time. Now take all those words that you have on your little sun around that main word and arrange them in any way you like. So you want to feel that it captures a sense of being true for you and how the words juxtapose each other, the tensions, the potential new imagery that comes from joining the words or putting them together, whatever feels right for you. Poetry is about choice. It's about freedom of expression. It's about freedom of creative play. So pause now if you need more time to do that. But if you have done it, look at your arrangement, take some time for this, and see if you can give it a title. And then share with me when you have that. And I'd love to hear your story, hear your bio about it. Tell me when you got COVID, how it's been with you for long COVID, how long you've had it, what your healing journey has been, where you're watching from. Share your poem with me. I'd love to read it. And if, with your permission, you'd like it to be published in a book, let me know as well. We can get that going. And the last thing I wanted to do for you was bring up some goddess imagery. You know, I've got lots that I could mention, but right now I just brought one from the Goddess Power Oracle. I do a lot of oracle card reading sometimes, and that helps me process my thoughts, my emotions. So it's like a way, it's a mirror. It's like having a friend on hand that you can talk to and that responds. And this is about the goddess Iris, as you know, from the iris of the eye, and how we perceive things. And it's about communicating, how we communicate things as well. So there's a sense of dialogue, both back and forth. And here I've got a quote from pages 64 to 65 of the Oracle book that comes with the Oracle cards. And it's a beautiful image here that I've got from a different website that I can share with you if you like, that shows that Iris is the Greek goddess of the rainbow and a messenger. So that, as we know, at the end of a rainstorm and the sun comes out, we often get a rainbow as a gift. And a rainbow for me is like the gift from God that we are going to be healed and you will heal. And there will be something precious at the end that you can share or even hold for yourself of that journey. So this Oracle card says, the messenger goddess Iris knows the importance of clear communication. And it's hard, right, with when we have long COVID sometimes to talk about it or to have the words to express it. And she urges you to speak up for yourself. If you've come from an environment, family, or cultural history where you have not had a voice, this might feel like you're yelling. But that's all right. Times are changing, and now is not the time to be shy. It's okay to feel awkward or flustered, but the goddess Iris brings her powers of clarity and says it is your turn to be heard. So gather your courage. The people who are important to you in the long run will listen and witness you, and then you can engage in positive conversation that leads to heartfelt solutions. Even if your voice feels untrue and comes from a victim mentality, you must still speak what is inside you in order for you to heal or change it and to find a way to the real truth. Let yourself be heard, and the great goddess will send strong teachers and wonderful allies for you. I wish for you, I wish healing for you, I wish companionship for you and solace in your journey of healing. And if you'd like to reach out for me, here are my contact coordinates, mariafigueredo.com or mfiguere@yorku.ca. Thank you for being here with me, and I hope to hear from you.